3 weeks in the books in the NFL season, 1 week to go in September here for the fantasy football schedule. This is the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show. On this episode, we got waiver wire recommendations, the stream team, and stealthy starts. Let's kick it off. What's up, everybody? My name is Steven Andrus, joined by Jesse Pantusco from the Radio.com Sports staff. As we kick off every episode, we're going to look at waiver wire, pick them up. Options that we think should be rostered in most fantasy football leagues, but not necessarily start in week 4. If Devonta Freeman and Carolina running back Mike Davis are still out there, they are the priority this week, but they're owned in more than 50% of leagues. So we're going to look at some other names. I'm going to start with San Francisco running back Jeff Wilson. This backfield is extremely banged up. Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman have knee injuries. In week 3, Jerick McKinnon left the game with a rib injury. He had 17 touches, but only one of those came in the fourth quarter. So Wilson in week 3, only 15 rushing yards and a touchdown on 12 carries, but he also added 3 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. Even if McKinnon is healthy in week 4, there's enough volume in this backfield to support both of them if Mostert and Coleman continue to be out, and their initial injury timeline suggested that they would be out as well in week number 4. Jesse?
Yeah, I think Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings will probably be one of the most coveted players on waivers this week. He's a first-round rookie out of LSU, led college football in catches a year ago. He's been super efficient so far for Minnesota, catching 80% of his targets in the early going. Jefferson broke out for 175 yards on 7 catches Sunday against Tennessee. He scored his first career touchdown in that game as well. We know Kirk Cousins loves targeting his slot receivers. You remember the rapport he showed with Jamison Crowder during his time in Washington. And Jefferson has also showed he can make plays after the catch. He actually reached a top speed of 20.1 miles per hour on his 71-yard touchdown sprint Sunday. With Stephon Diggs gone and Adam Thielen drawing shadow coverage most weeks, I think Jefferson has a real chance to be a fantasy asset in Minnesota.
I love that, dropping the next-gen stats for these rookies, going next level on us. You know, you bring up a good point, though, that these rookie receivers, every year it seems like they start off slow, teams in our leagues drop them, and then people pick them up when they finally break out. And I have another one for you, not just Jefferson, but I'm going to go back to San Francisco, wide receiver Bandon Aiyuk, their first-round pick in the NFL draft. And right now it's really just survival of the fittest in San Francisco. George Kittle and Deebo Samuel are banged up. That leaves Bandon Aiyuk, who got a sizable role in week 3, 5 receptions for 70 yards on 8 targets. And then Kyle Shanahan got creative as well, giving him 3 carries, turned those into 31 rushing yards and a touchdown. So week 4 against Philadelphia, I would hesitate to start him against Darius Slay, the shutdown corner for the Eagles, but I think at this point, Aiyuk should absolutely be rostered in most leagues moving forward.
Yeah, and my other waiver wire selection is going to be Carlos Hyde. He's a player I'm targeting this week on the week 4 waiver wire. He's mostly been employed as a change of pace back for Seattle so far, but I think he's going to see an elevated role with Chris Carson's injury coming at the end of week 3. As of now, it looks like Carson's knee injury is not going to be a season ender, but given his injury history, the Seahawks might opt to play it safe by sitting in the next 2 weeks. They have a bye coming up in week 6, so that would give them a little time to heal up. And remember, Carlos Hyde, he's coming off one of his better seasons, went for over 1,000 yards as the Texans bell cow a year ago. And this week, only the Packers have put up more points than Seattle so far this season, which provides a lot of scoring opportunities for Hyde, who I imagine would be the goal line finisher in Seattle.
All right, there's 4 solid waiver wire options for you. Let's move on to the stream team. This is our top quarterback, tight end, and defense option owned in less than 50% of leagues that we believe you can stream, aka start right away here in week number 4. And on this show, we respect our elders, especially when they're much, much elder. Top quarterback streaming option for week 4, Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Miami Dolphins. Got a little sauce from Gardner Minshew last week. What did he do? Comes out right away and just dominates. Week 4 matchup against Seattle. Fitzmagic in back-to-back weeks, 24-plus points. Seattle has allowed 20-plus to quarterbacks all 3 weeks this year, including 30-plus points in back-to-back weeks. Fear the beard, Jesse. Fear the beard in week number 4.
I like the pick. I'm going to cover tight end for us. So I'm going to go with the first tight end selected in last year's draft, TJ Hockenson of the Detroit Lions, as my week 4 streaming recommendation at tight end. Hockenson, he hails from the University of Iowa, tight end U, same school that produced George Kittle, Noah Fant, Dallas Clark, CJ Fedorowicz, and a bunch of others. Through 3 weeks, Hockenson quietly ranks 5th among tight ends in receiving yards with 171. He's shown a solid floor in fantasy, clearing 50 yards in all 3 games for Detroit. And now he has a week 4 matchup against New Orleans. The Saints have actually had a pretty hard time covering tight ends this year. They've already allowed touchdowns to O.J. Howard, Darren Waller, and in the Sunday night game, Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis of Green Bay. I think the game environment as 4-point home underdogs against New Orleans also works in Hockenson's favor, which puts him on my streaming radar this week.
No, it's a great option. The Saints look pitiful covering tight ends right now early in the season. I love that pick. My streaming defense option is pretty simple. Start any defense that's facing a New York football team. In week 4, that's the Broncos at the Jets and the Rams at home against the Giants. No teams are surrendering more fantasy points to defenses through 3 weeks than the Jets and the Giants. Both offenses are averaging less than 2 touchdowns per game. The Giants, 9 sacks allowed and 7 turnovers. The Jets, 6 sacks allowed, 5 turnovers, a safety, and 2 defensive touchdowns. The Jets and the Giants look pitiful right now. Stream whatever defense is facing those 2 offenses. Let's move on to Stealthy starts, and these are options that for the most part are not started in less than 50% of leagues that we think you can stick into your lineups in week number 4. Jesse, kick us off on this one.
Dude, I got 2 words for you, Stephen. Rex Burkhead. This may scream of recency bias because Burkhead, of course, is coming off a 3-touchdown game against Las Vegas in week 3. But if James White misses another game, remember his father recently passed away in a car accident, I think Burkhead is definitely in play as a flex against Kansas City. Burkhead's biggest strength is as a receiver. So far, he's 7th among running backs in receiving yards with 96. I expect the Patriots to throw early and often as 7-point road underdogs in Kansas City. Cam Newton threw 44 passes under similar circumstances on the road against Seattle 2 weeks ago. So I don't think volume is going to be a problem for Burkhead. He's shown a nose for the end zone so far with 3 touchdowns already, same amount he had all of last season. It's also worth noting that Burkhead has a little history against Kansas City. He scored a pair of touchdowns, including the game winner in his last visit to Arrowhead during the 2018 playoffs.
No, I love that pick. And my start here is going along the lines of the logic you use for TJ Hockenson. I'm going with Marvin Jones, the Lions wide receiver 2 against the Saints. And my logic here is I think they're just going to shy away from throwing at Kenny Golladay, who's likely going to be shadowed by Saints shutdown cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. We saw this a few years back. Detroit did the same thing, and Marvin Jones saw 14 targets against the Saints, turned that into 6 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. He's been quiet so far this year. He's playing about 90% of the snaps, so he's getting a full workload, but Matthew Stafford didn't target him much last week. Only 3 targets. The week before, only 6 targets against Green Bay. He did score a touchdown in that game. So it's been a little more quiet than the production we saw from Marvin Jones a year ago. But I think with Marshawn Lattimore staying with Kenny Golladay, I think that's going to make Marvin Jones a little bit more of a viable option and a stealthy start in week number 4.
How about a guy who's only started in 39% of ESPN leagues, Devante Parker in week 4? Seattle, Miami right now has the 2nd highest Vegas game total. They have set the over-under at 54 for that one. Should be a slugfest. The Seahawks secondary has allowed over 430 passing yards per game this year, easily the worst in the league. They've yielded 100-yard games to 6 players already. That includes Michael Gallup, Cedric Wilson of the Cowboys. Julian Edelman had a career high in yards in week 2. Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage in the opener. Parker hasn't had a ceiling game yet this year, but remember, he finished 5th in receiving yards last season with over 1,200. In a game where the Dolphins are probably going to be playing from behind, Vegas has them as 6.5-point home underdogs at the moment. I think Parker has the potential to even finish as a top 10 fantasy receiver this week.
Thank you so much to everybody for joining us this week on the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show. As always, if you have any fantasy questions, Go to our YouTube page. If you aren't already watching the show there already, you can leave us questions in the YouTube comments, and we can answer your fantasy questions for you for week number 4. But for Jesse Pantusco, I'm Steven Andress. We'll see you next week on the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show.